All right, today is Daf Chaf. Shabbos is Daf. It's a biggie, so let's get going. We ended off yesterday kind of in the middle of a discussion. We had a brisa about a guy who's masna when he sells his daughter as an Amma Ivriya, Almanas Shalo Liyayid. It was Machlekes Tanaim, Reb Meir, and the Chachamim, whether or not will the Tanai be Niskayim. We thought initially to say that Reb Meir will say a person could be masna al mashakasav b'Torah. We then proved that Rav Meir holds you cannot be masna al mashakasav b'Torah. So what's the reason why the Tanai is going to be Kayim? The Gemara suggested it was a pasuk, Gzeres HaKosav, that is la'ama, that she can be an Amma Ivriya even though there's no Yud Shaykh. And the Rabbanan who don't darshan Amma is because they use Amma to teach you Malamid Shemeicher L'Psulim. That if you sell her to an Amma where the Yud would technically be Chal because of Kiddushin or Taifsin, it will be a fine sale. 9 lines up from the bottom of Yetesmet Beis, V'halei Dinu. You don't even need a pasuk for that. L'chayer it's a kal v'chaymer. Im mekachel l'psulim, leim karena l'psulim. If a father can sell his daughter for marriage to a puzzle, so for sure he could sell her as an amivriya to a puzzle. But the Gemara says, no, you can't make such a kal v'chaymer because mal mekachel l'psulim, shekain odem makadesh es bitek shi naira. You see the father has an extra strength that he can be makadesh her to psulim, illustrated by the fact that he still can be makadesh her when she is a naira. However, yim karena l'psulim, so therefore you can bring a raya from there that he can sell her to psulim when shein odem meichers bitek shi naira, because once she hits nairas, he can no longer sell his daughter as an amivriya. So you see a weakness. Talmud Leimer must be because the pasuk says le'ama malamid shemeicher l'psulin gzeres hakasav, that you can sell her even to a puzzle. Rabbi Eliezer Eimer, another pshat in the brisa, im le'lamid shemeicher l'psulin. If the whole point of this pasuk is to tell you that you can sell it l'psulim, that can't be, because we know from another makar, harei kvar nemar im ra b'nei adeineha. If it's ra, if it's bad in the eyes of the adain that he didn't marry her al yidei yud, and we darshan shara b'nisueha, meaning it's aser. Ma Talmud Leimer la'ama. So what do we use with the word la'ama now that we don't need it to teach you that it'll work by psulim? Malamid shemeichra, moving to Amid Aleph, le'krayvim. You can even sell her to an amma to your relatives, even though those are arayas and there's no yud possible. Ve'halei dinhu, but I can learn from a kal v'chaymer. Im meicher l'psulin lo'im karena le'krayvim. I can't sell to my own relative. To which the Gemara says, no, not so pasha, because ma'ala meicher l'psulin shimrotz liyad miyayid. L'maisa yud would work by psulim. It's also to do it, but l'maisa kedushin will be typhus. You can't say therefore yim karena le'krayvim she'im rotz liyayid and miyayid. If you sell your daughter to your brother or something or an erva like that, then yud won't be shaykh because the kedushin wouldn't even be typhus. So Amar Kra la'ama malamid shemeicher le'krayvim. Therefore, the gzeres hakasav zok Rabbi Eliezer says la'ama that you can sell her to krayvim even though yud is not a possibility. For Rabbi Meir, how will he know about psulin? Nafkalim heichad nafkalei Rabbi Eliezer from Ra. Krayvim savar le'krabanan. But Rabbi Meir can hold like the Rabbanan's sheet about krayvim. Damri ein meicher le'krayvim. So you don't need to have a gzeres hakasav of how it'll work. He'll hold you can't do it. You don't need a makar in the first place. Tani Chada, it says in one brisa, Meicher La'aviv, that a man can sell his own daughter to his father, right, to her Zayda. Ve'ena Meicher L'bnai, but you can't sell his Amma to his own son, so her brother can't become her Adain. V'tanya idach ein Meicher La'aviv v'Leila B'nai. It doesn't work either way. So Bishlema ein a Meicher La'aviv v'Leila B'nai. If you want to tell me across the board, it will never work as a Mechira K'Rabbanan, because according to the Rabbanan, you're not allowed to sell your daughter Amma to any Krayvim. Ela Meicher La'aviv ve'ein Meicher L'bnai. This kind of a split, come on, who's that going like? Like K'Rabbanan v'loik Rabbi Eliezer, which the Gemara says no, it's le'elim K'Rabbanan. But Maidu Rabbanan hechet ikat tzad yud. Avad you can't sell to Krayvim unless there's a tzad yud. Now what does a tzad yud mean? That means you can come up with a case that it would possibly work to have yud. So if a guy sells his daughter to his father, meaning to her Zayda, even though the Zayda can't do yibum because it's his anical or anaklet, but the Zayda has other sons, which are technically her uncles, that could do yud, right? Because a man can marry his niece. So because there's a tzad yud, therefore, according to the Rabbanan, we'll make the division and the split between selling to a father or selling to a son. Tanu Rabbanan. So how do we touch that? If he goes in with his body, he's going to leave with his body. What does that mean? So begapai nichnas begufay. So begufay nichnas v'gufay yetze. It means he has to leave with his entire body intact. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Eimer yichidi nichnas yichidi yetze. It's not going about his body at all. It's going about his marital status. If he comes in alone, he leaves alone. So my begufay nichnas begufay yetze. What does that mean according to the Tanakama that he'll go out with his body intact? Omerava leimer she'ena yetze b'reishay avarim ke'eved. He's not going to go free just like you would by an Eved Kanani, by Shein Va'ayin, that he'll go free. That halacha doesn't exist by an Eved Ivri. Omer le'abaya, hahu mile'seitze k'tzeisa avodim nafka. We know that already, that he doesn't go out like an Eved Kanani, so we don't need it from here, from Begapai. So Rava, ime hosm hava mina nesiv le demei eine v'nefuk. It might be different than the Eved Kanani, because by an Eved Ivri, maybe you'll pay him for the value of his eye, etc., and then he goes free. Kamash Blun, you don't say that. He does not go free. He only gets the cash, but not the actual shechrer. The next Tana was Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Eimer, Yechidi Nichnas, Yechidi Yetze. If he comes in alone, he goes out alone. So my Yechidi Yetze, what does it mean he goes out alone? Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, Hachi Kamer. Yesh Lai Isha Ubanim. If he comes into the Avdus with Isha Ubanim as a family man, then Rabbi Meiser Le Shifcha Kananis, the Odin can now additionally give him a Shifcha Kananis to have more children. However, Ein Le Isha Ubanim, if he comes in as a bachelor, Ein Rabbi Meiser Le Shifcha Kananis, then he can't be given another wife. A couple of quick points. First of all, this Isha Ubanim, is it Lav Davka or Davka? Do you need both wife and children, or maybe just wife? That seems to be a Machlekes Rishonim. The Rambam seems to say you need to have both the Isha and the Banim. Rashi and Chumash seems to be Meduyik. It's only an Isha is enough. The Mishnah Melech wants to know how Rashi knows that, but the emes says it's Mefurish in the Tais V'Sarush by us that it's either or, Isha or Banim. But just in general, this idea seems counterintuitive. You'd think that if he comes in as a bachelor, okay, now I can give him a Shifcha Kananis. But if he comes in as a happy family man, he's got a wife, he's got children, now I could give him a Shifcha? So the Chizkuni in the beginning of Parshas Mishpatim says, if he's already married, we're not worried about the relationship he's going to build with this, technically, Shiksa, Shifcha Kananis, because he'll have Gaguim for his Isha and his family. So we're not worried about the future with this guy. The Maral and the Gur Aryeh even takes it a step further, that if he has a family already, we have nothing to worry about the Shifcha Kananis becoming his Bas Zugai. It's not his Shidduch. It's just a way to manufacture more children. But if he comes in as a bachelor, Zok the Maral, we might construe this Shifcha Kananis as his Bas Zugai, it's his real Shidduch, and that, of course, would be terrible for him. Rav Sternbuch in the Tam V'das takes it an even more Musardik avert, that a person has to know what a healthy marriage is before the opportunity of the Odin giving him a Shifcha Kananis. So he has to have a wife and children. Okay, now we get into the details of Geroi and Kesef, of paying off the additional chayiv that the Eved has. Tanu Rabbanan, Nimker b'Mana, let's say he's sold as a Mana. 100 zuz. V'ishbiach v'amin al Masayim, and now he goes up in value. I guess he was working out, and now he's a stronger, better Eved. Now he's worth 200. Minayin she'ein mechashvin le'elamana. How do you know that the Geroi and Kesef only has to reckon with the Mana, but not the Masayim? Shenamar mikesef miknosai. And from the time of when that actual transaction took place, that's the only time we have to actually care about. What about the opposite case? Nimker b'Masayim. Let's say he started off being sold as 200. V'hichsef v'yomen al mana, and then he depreciated, and he went down to only a mana. Minayin she'ein mechashvin le'elamana. How do you know that you still go to the lower amount, or more mekel for the Geroi and Kesef of the Eved? Tamalemer kefi shanav, according to his years. Fact the Gemara ainli ela Eved and Nimker lev kechavim. These psukim are talking about when the Yid is sold to a Goyish owner. Hoyel v'nigel v'krevim. Since we already see one more mekel, that we allow the Krevim to be goyal against the will of the Goyish owner, Yadai ala Tachtaina. But Nimker Yisrael Minal, and how do you know we're going to be so makel for the Eved Ivri who's owned by a Yid? We don't see that. Which the Gemara answers, Talmud Lemer Sacher Sacher L'Gzei Rishava. So it'll be the same halachas. Omer Abaya. Hareini kiven Azai b'Shukei b'Tveria. I am as sharp as Ben Azai in the Shukei Tveria. We'd spoken out back when this Gemara was in the Masech Saita from Rabbi Yashiv, I think it was based on the Marsha, that when Abaya says he was like Ben Azai b'Shukei Tveria, that the Maila Ben Azai is even when he was in a distracted place, like the Shukei Tveria, he still was sharp and focused like a laser on his learning. Rabbi Rosner likes to say over from the biography of Rabbi Yashiv, this is a great verse to have been said by Rabbi Yashiv, because Rabbi Yashiv's Einiklach, he had 5 generations or so of Einiklach, and they all knew that when the Zayda was asleep, they had to be very quiet, but when the Zayda was learning, they could make as much ruckus and noise as they want, because nothing would distract him, because he was like Ben Azai, B'Shukei Tveria. Anyway, Amalei HaHumer Rabbanan LaAbaye. Michti, let's see. We got these 2 psukim that we had in the previous brisa. Hani Krai Ikal Midrashinu L'Kula V'Ikal Midrashinu L'Chumra. So my chos is Lidrashinu L'Kula. How did the Tana know that we should darshan for the Kula, for the benefit of this Eved Ivri, Nidrashinu L'Chumra? To which the Gemara says, Laisal Kadaitach. Mida'akal Rachmana L'Gabei. You find by other halachas that the Torah is more makel for the Eved Ivri, and therefore we can assume that we always go for the benefit, that we darshan the psukim in a Kula way for the Eved Ivri. Dear Tanya, Ki Tov Lo Imach. It's good for him, meaning the Eved Ivri with you. It means Imach b'Meichel v'Imach b'Mishta Shalei Tei Ata Oichel Pas Nikia. You can't eat the good food. V'Hu Oichel Pas Kibar Ata Shaisi, and he eats the bad stuff. V'hu shaisi yayin chadash. He can't drink the bad wine while you drink the good wine. Ata yoshin al gabi meichim. You sleep on the mattress. V'hu yochel al gabi yateven. He sleeps on the straw. Mikan amru kol ha'kaina eved ivri kekaina adayin la'atzmai. So we're very good to the eved ivri. The kasha that many achrayim deal with here is how do you reconcile this with the sukkah in Bava Metzia? Here we're saying that your person's mechuyev to give the equal treatment to their eved ivri. However, if 2 guys are walking in the midbar and there's only enough water for one of them, then you don't have to take care of him equally. You can take care of yourself first. So why does it seem like I have to be more concerned with the eved ivri than I have to be with my fellow chaver. The Marit is machalik that each one of them by the midbar has their own chiyuv to take care of each other. That might be part of it. There are other answers given. Even the Chashukei Chemed over here has a shaila of, let's say there's only one shtreimel. And the shaila is, do I have to give my eved the shtreimel to wear, or can I keep it for myself? It might be telling on that machlekes we just mentioned between the Rambam and the Ritva, but we'll move on. So ve'ema frak the Gemara on Abaye hani mili le'inyan achil v'shtia. Maybe this idea that you have to actually give kulais for the eved, that's only dafka by achil and shtia. Ki hechid le'let tarbe, because he can't be mitzar. Aber hola inyan pidyan nachmer aleh. And I'll show you that there's going to be precedent to be more machmer on the eved ivri legabe his pedia. Mid Rabbi Yosef Chanina, who's going to show us how terrible it is to become an eved ivri because it comes on the heels of doing all these other averos, as we're about to learn right now. De Tanya, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina Omer bo re'ei kamakasha avoka shel shvius. If someone does their schayr with shvius, as Rashi says, Adam nice of a nice and pairs b'shvius, l'seif meicher es metaltalov, he's going to sell his property. Shenamar b'shnas hayovel toshuvu ish el achuzasai. The samach lei and the chisim karenu mimkar la'amisecha oikinoi miyad amisecha. So we darshan dover hanikne miyad liyad. That's referring to the metaltalin. That's next to the pasuk when a person's doing schayr with shvius. Loi hirgish. Let's say the person doesn't change his ways. So l'seif meicher es adaisav, he's going to sell his fields, because the pasuk says ki yamach echichu machar me'achuzasai. Loy basa liyada yad shemeicher es beisai. He's still not going to do better. Now he's going to have to sell his house. Shenamar ki yimkar beis ma'ishav irchayma. Now the Gemara parenthetically says ma'ishna hasam d'amar loy hirgish u'ma'ishna hacha d'amar loy basa liyada. Two different expressions. That means he's not stopping to think about what he's doing. Rav Huna d'amar Rav Huna kivin she'avar adam aver of shanaba. If a guy repeats the aver that he did, hutralei becomes heter to him. Hutralei salka daitach. You think it becomes mutter just because he repeats it? Elanas is like a heter. Famous Chazal. So that's why we changed the expression here. Reb Chaim Shmuel Levitz in his Sichas point out, why can't Rav Huna just say it straight? A guy who does it's nas like a heter. Why does he say it in a strange way of it becomes mutter and then we have to clarify? And Rav Chaim Shmuel Levitz explains that Rav Huna was doing this designed to help the avaryan, because if you just tell a guy don't do the avera, it may not sink in. But if you say something shocking that he has to now ask a question, and through shakal of atarya comes to the understanding, he'll be typhus the message that much more. Back to the Brisa, lebasa liyodei ad shemeicher es bitai. He's not going to be able to do his tshuva until he has more problems, and he's going to have to sell off his daughter as an amma. Shenemer v'chi yimkar ish as bitai la amma. And now the Gemara just interrupts and says, v'afal gav de bita leksiva b'hai in yana, even though that's not in this parsha. Hakam ashmulan. Another zaytik lesson. Nizbein inish brate. A person will rather sell his daughter will a nezif berbisa and to borrow money at interest, because my tamak is brate migra v'nafka. She has Gerayin Kesef. She could go free from her servitude. As opposed to borrowing like a ribbis, which is just going to continue on and not have any relief. Back to the Brisa. After the guy sells his daughter, now he's going to come to borrow money with ribbis. Now finally he sells himself. This guy who hasn't stopped selling perish vias. And not only to you he's going to come to sell himself, but even to a ger. Shnamar leger v'loy leger tzedek. We're not talking about the good kind of ger. El leger taishav, a gayish ger. Shnamar ger taishav. Mishpachas ger ze oivik chavim. And then the pasuk says he's even going to be sold to a gayish, not even a ger taishav. Kishu aimer leeker. The pasuk says it's going to be to an avodah zara of that ger's family, turning over zehan nimker leivik chavim atzma. That means that because of the perish vias this guy did business with, ultimately this eved is going to be sold to an oived kechavim and be involved in actually working for the actual avodah zara of this guy. Rashi learns he's going to draw water and be a wood chopper. L'shem that avodah zara. That whole sad saga is just to bring out the point that we should be machmir on the pedia of the eved ivri and not always look for the kula. So Amalei Abaye said back, Hasam ha'hadre kra. That pasuk that's talking about where the eved ivri is working for the guy, ultimately the Torah is talking about bringing him back. So Klal Yisrael should have rachmanas on him. The Tani Devei Rabbi Shmuel, Hoyel v'holach zev nasa kaimer le'eved kechavim, because he went and became this servant to the avodah zara. Ema lidchi even acher neifel. We should push a big rock on top of him. In other words, kick him while he's down. Talmud Leimer, the pasuk says, Acharei nimkar geula tia loy echad me'echav gigolenu. So Torah specifically says to look out for him and take care of him. Despite the fact that he fell so low, we bring him back to beguile him. Maybe we only take that so far that he hasn't gone off the derech. It's still not a raya. Maybe we should go out of our way to be makel on him to make sure he doesn't go off the derech. But stam pedia from an Eiv Kechavim, we don't necessarily see that we should darshan the psukim lekula. Maybe we should go like Rabbi Yosef Chanina to go lechumra. There's an important trumas hadeshin, siman kuf lamed ches, that's brought out by this Gemara, that if a person is put into chayrim and we're afraid that person who is in Chayrim might go off the derech as a result of being put in Chayrim. The Truma suggestion says, tough, you can leave him there. It's not your cheshbon. You have to do what you got to do. You put him in Chayrim. And the Ramah brings this. But the Taz asks on that Ramah from our sugya that you have to take into account if he's going to go off the derech as a result of that Chayrim, similar to this Eved Ivri working for the Avodah Zarah. This is negea to the weighty shilas of Menahalim throwing out Bachrim out of yeshiva, that they're doing it, l'tayelis of the Talmidim who are remaining in yeshiva. But of course, do we have to take into account the ruchnius of that boy who's being thrown out himself? But anyway, the Gemara now seems to have upshlugged. We need a new pshat for why we darshan these psukim l'kula by the pediyah of the Eved Ivri. Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, Trey, Kroi, Ksivi, there are two psukim, Ksiv im oid rabbis bashanim, which literally would mean if there's like a large amount left in the years. V'chsiv im ma'at nishar bashanim. It also says that they're a small amount. So v'chiyeh shanim merubis v'yeh shanim mu'atais. Years are a fixed amount. They're always the same amount. So it doesn't make sense to say there are some years that are bigger than others. Ella nisraba kaspai, if the Eved went up in value while he was an Eved, mikesef miknasai. Then we look at the money that was done from his lechatchila dika purchase. Nismad kaspoi, but if he depreciates, kifi shanav, we go according to the years. So in other words, we're using this new drasha, and that's why we're going to go lakula. Not because of some general rule, but because it's basically a new drasha that we go lakula, how he shots up the value of his gerayin kesef. Maybe we should say much more pushit. You know how you have bigger and smaller years? Well, how much time remains? Let's say he did work for 2 years, and there's still 4 more years remaining in his cheshbon. 4 more years! So Nesev le Dalad mikesef miknosai. So then the gerayin kesef works out to be the 4 years. Ovid Dalad upashle tarti. Let's say he worked 4 years and only has 2 years remaining in his 6 years. So Nesev tarti kafi shanav. The pasuk has a very pashut way to read it. You don't have to learn. We're talking about this increase or decrease in the Eved's own value. To which the Gemara says, Im kain nichtev kra im oid rabbi shanim im ma'at nishar b'shanim. My bashanim. What does it mean in the years? To teach you nisraba kaspa b'shanim. If he goes up in value, then mikesef miknosai, we go according to the original purchase price. Nismad kaspa b'shanim. If he goes down in value, then it's kafi shanav, only according to the amount of years he has left. In other words, the price that he is now, always going l'kula for his gerayin kesef. Amar of Yosef, Darshinu Rav Nachman Lahani Kroi Ke Sinai. He mamish learned it stark, just like they taught it at Sinai. Simen Eved Beis Chatzayin Beis Eved Kroivim. Boy Mine Rav Huna Barchinanam Rav Sheshes. Eved Ivri Hanimker Levid Kechavim. Let's say you have this Eved Ivri. He sold to an Eved. He sold off to a guy. I now want to beguile him. Nigal Lechatzayin? Ain't a Nigal Lechatzayin. Can I redeem him in part? Or is it all or nothing? So now what's the Shaila going to be telling on? Gu'ulasai. Do we have a Gzeir Shava of Gula Gula Misteach Chuza Gomar? Masteach Chuza in a nigel lechatzayin? The halach is by a steach chuza. You can't do it in part. You have to do it all or nothing. So af hai nami, by the Eved Ivri ain't a nigel lechatzayin. A dilma lekula amrinan, lechumra le amrinan. You only want to be gael lechatzayin when it comes out to be a kula, but not a chumra. And the Gemara is going to explain how it can work out lekula and lechumra. Amar later, Sheshes says back, lav amra tasam nimkar kulei v'loy chetziai. Remember back on Daf Yud Chesam at Aleph, we said that you can't sell half an Eved. So hachinami nigel kulei v'loy chetziai. You can't be gael only half of the Eved. Amar Abaya, im tim tzalemer nigel lechatzayin. If you're going to say you can do it, so mishkachas lekula ula chumra. So how does that work? Lekula, I'll give you the following case. Is going to be a kula, kazab nebemeya. Let's say you bought this Eved for 100 zuz. Yoav lechamshin palki ditmei, and then the Eved came up with $50 on his own. So he's trying to do $50 towards his gerayin kesef. V'ashkach v'kam lemosan, and then he appreciated, and now he stands at 200. So yamrit nigel lechatzayin, if you're saying that worked when he did the half of the chatzayin, so now he technically paid off half of his value. So if he's worth 200, yoav le meyav enough. He can give 100 more zuz, and then he can go free. But yamrit ain't nigel lechatzayin, and it didn't work. So yoav le meyav v'chamshin v'nafik. So now that 50 that he gave is only going to be 50 towards the total amount, and now he has to pay another 150, and at that point he can go free. Which means that he should never exceed beyond that initial 100 that he paid for him. So why wouldn't we go lakula? Which the Gemara says, going to Eiker, v'zel v'Eiker. It's when it was high, it went down, and then got high again. So in other words, he was originally worth 200. Then it went down to 100. So when it went back up to 200, and now there's the makom to be machmir. And now Abaye continues, mishkachas lo l'chumer, and I could find a more chumerdika case. Zabnei b'mosin, let's say you bought it for 200. Yoav meya palgi did meya, and now the Eved comes up with half the money, meaning 100 for his own gerayin kesef. V'ichsef v'kom al meya, and now he goes down in value to 100. Iyamrit nigel lechatzayin. If you say you can be nigel lechatzayin, so yohav lechamshin v'nafik, now he has to still give another 50 because he still owns for half. But iyamrit in nigel lechatzayin. If you tell me nothing worked, worked. So now Hanach Mea Pikodin Hugabe. So that 100 that he paid, it didn't work als the pidyon for Chatzayin, but it works als a Pikodin. And therefore you tell him, Yohavlu Nihal Levinofik. Just keep the money and I'm going to go, because all I owe you is 100 total. Which you have that 1 year to be paid before it becomes permanent property of the Lekeach and doesn't go back to the Meicher by Yovel. So Nigal Lechatzayin, Aina Nigal Lechatzayin. And what's it talion? Geulasa Misteachuza Gomar, Masteachuza Aina Nigal Lechatzayin, just like we know by a Steachuza you can't do it Lechatzayin, Af Hai Nami, also by the house, also Aina Nigal Lechatzayin. Dilma Hechad de Gali Gali, Hechad Legali Legali, where it's very specific to the Steachuza and not to the Batei Arichaima. Amr Le Rav Shesha said back, Midrasha Shel Rav Shimon Nishma, from the halacha that Rav Shimon Darshans we learned, Shel Loiva V'Goyel, that you can borrow money and be Goyel the Batei Arichaima, V'Goyel Lechatzayin, and a second halacha that you can also be Goyel Lechatzayin. Dear Tanya, Im Goyel Yigal Malamit Shalova V'Goyel, that you're allowed to borrow money and do the Geula, V'Goyel Lechatzayin, and you can also do it Lechatzayin. Amr Rabbi Shimon Matam, why was the Torah mat there? Lefisha Matzina b'Meicher Steachuza Shiyafa Kaychai. We were miyafa the kayach of the seller of the Steachuza. Shim Higia Yovel V'Lei Nigala Chayzer Slabala B'Yovel. If no Geula happened, it goes back to the original Meicher at Yovel. Hura Kaychai, but there's a chumrah there. She'ena Leiva V'Goyel. You can't borrow money and do it. In other words, you have to use money that you actually own, that you worked for, that you were Yerush, but you can't borrow money from the bank and then do the Geula with it. And also V'Goyel Lechatzayin, that you cannot be Goyel the Steachuza Lechatzayin. Makdish Hura Kaychai, but if you are Makdish this Steachuza, then it's Hura Kaychai Shim Higia Yovel V'Lei Nigala. If the Yovel year comes without any Padiyah, Yotzel Kahanim B'Yovel, it becomes the property of the Kahanim. So Yafa Kaychai Shalava V'Goyel and V'Goyel Lechatzayin. So Reb Shimon over here, who's Dirish time in Dekra, and the whole idea here is that we want to keep these pieces of property in the family. So if you're not Goyel, if that's going to lead to the loss of the property come Yovel, like by a case of being Makdish the Steachuza, the Torah wanted to make it easier to be Goyel it before Yovel, to allow it to be done with borrowed money and lechatzayin. So Haimaicher bias, but Erichaim Nami, Hayel Vahura Kaichai, since it's going to be worse for him. She'im Mola Leishana Tamima, if a whole year goes by, V'le Nigel Nechlat, it's going to become 100% now the Lekechs forever. So Yufa Kaichai Shalava V'Goyel Lechatzayin. We allow more kulais to do this kind of geula with the same logic. Okay, we're going to have to stop here and pick it up Mirta Shem Sunday to continue this discussion.